This is Luke from Emo Electric, and we're here today to compare 4 of the 3 horsepower, 1 kilowatt electric outboards that we sell. We've got the Torqeedo Travel S, the ePropulsion Spirit, the Remigo One, and the Temo 1000. This is the first of a 4-part video where we're going to go into cost, runtime data, how much these motors weigh. We'll test these out on the water, so we'll see how our runtime and range data compares to what the manufacturers provide. We'll also show you how these get installed on your boat. If you're interested in any of these motors, we sell all of them locally here on Long Island and anywhere in the US. We ship these all over the place. And if you're interested in comparing some of the runtime data that we talk about in this video, head over to our website where you can download a PDF with all of that information. So to kick things off here, we'll tell you a little bit about each motor, some of our favorite features, and a little bit about the company and where the motors are made. So first off, we have the Torqeedo Travel S, 1.1 kilowatt, 3 horsepower, retails for $2,998 in short shaft. Torqeedo was the first company to ever make an electric outboard like this. They started about 20 years ago. And they've pretty much always been the market leader, although now ePropulsion is probably catching up, at least in the US. But we really love the new features that Torqeedo has added to the Travel S that they revamped in 2024. They eliminated the cables connecting the battery to the motor. The tiller is now built in. They added multiple tilt trim angles. You get a ton of data from this display, and it's really kind of the most feature-rich motor of any of the electric outboards that we're talking about today. So next up, we've got the ePropulsion Spirit. This is the ePropulsion Spirit Evo, very similar to the ePropulsion Spirit 1.0 Plus. We have a whole other video we'll link here where you can learn about the differences between those 2 motors. But they're both 1 kilowatt, 3 horsepower, made in China by ePropulsion. ePropulsion has really exploded onto the scene in the last 5 years or so, and they're probably one of the largest manufacturers, along with Torqeedo, of electric outboards globally. We love how the Spirit has a floating battery, so if you drop it in the water, it's not sinking to the bottom, it's sitting right there. We have tried that. And the Spirit, as you'll see in some of our runtime tests, performs best in terms of speed and range at various power outputs. So when it comes to performance, Spirit is generally the winner here. Next up, we have the Remigo One. So this is a 1 kilowatt, 3 horsepower electric outboard, retails for $2,999, made by Remigo, who's a relatively new company based in Slovenia. And there's a few things we really love about the Remigo One. One is the fact that the battery is built into the motor itself, unlike these other 3 where they're removable. So there's some trade-offs there, but the big thing with the Remigo is that it just appears like it's more durable and can take more of a beating than any of these other motors. This housing is all aluminum. This tiller is all metal. Very little plastic involved in the construction here. It also has a transom bracket that stays on your boat, and then the motor lifts up and comes right off. And the Remigo One also has an adjustable shaft length, which makes our life a lot easier when it comes to stocking these things, but makes your life easier if you're using this motor across different boats. Allows you to really fine tune it to the transom of your dinghy or to your sailboat. And if you get a different boat later on, you can stick with that motor. And finally, we've got the Temo 1000, so 1.1 kilowatt, 3 horsepower, made by Temo France in France. Relatively new entrant to the US market. Obviously, very different looking motor than the Travel or the ePropulsion Spirit. This retails for $3,499. And there's a few things we really love about the Temo 1000. Just like the Remigo, it has an adjustable shaft length, works a little bit differently, but you can slide where this transom bracket attaches to the motor either up or down to get that shaft length dialed in for your boat. Just like the Remigo, it does have a transom bracket that lives on your boat, and then you can take the Temo off. The tiller is stowable inside of the shaft, which gets it out of your way and protects it when it's not in use. And then the battery just slips right down inside of the shaft there, and also stays out of your way. So a very cool, unique, newer design from Temo over in France. So today we're going to compare the manufacturer provided runtime to some tests that we're going to do out on the water ourselves. When it comes to the manufacturer provided runtime from Torqeedo, they say that the Travel S has a runtime of 59 minutes at full power. The battery is 10,080 watt hours. The ePropulsion Spirit has a runtime of 1 hour and 15 minutes at full power and a battery capacity of 1276 watt hours. The Remigo One has a runtime of 1 hour at full power, the battery capacity of 1085 watt hours. And finally, the Temo 1000 has a runtime of 50 minutes with a battery capacity of 949 watt hours. So before you install your Torqeedo motor onto your dinghy, you want to make sure that this mechanism is locked. Right? If it's unlocked or it's set for where the motor's up, it'll be more difficult to do this. So we often carry the Torqeedo either by that handle or the shaft, but I usually set it vertically on the boat. I'll raise the tiller up, turn it around, and we'll drop it in the water onto the dinghy, and then we'll tighten up these transom bolts. So the Torqeedo is actually the heaviest of all the motors we're talking about today. It comes in at 44.5 pounds. This shaft, the short shaft version, comes in at 25.5 pounds. And then the battery itself is 19 pounds. If you were to get the XP battery, the larger battery that works with this motor, it's about 23 pounds. So you add about 4 pounds onto it. Once you install the motor, one of the really nice features of the Torqeedo is that you can turn it all the way around, so you don't have to hang over the stern of the boat in order to install the battery. We're going to take off our cap right there that covers our power data port. We love that feature. We also love how they pre-install dielectric grease at the factory. And then we're going to grab our battery, again 19 pounds, drop it in there, drop it down, and then push it forward, and we hear that nice click. Then we can spin the motor around like so, and we're ready to get out on the water. So for the ePropulsion Spirit, similar to getting the Torqeedo on there, we're gonna fold the tiller up, and then we're gonna swing this transom bracket around. Then I usually grab the motor from right here and right here. Actually, make sure these are loosened up enough to fit on the transom. And again, just like the Torqeedo, make sure that the tilt trim mechanism is locked. And once it's on the stern of the boat, tighten it up. Something worth noting is if you have an angled transom, like we do on this dinghy, you'll want to adjust your trim setting when the motor is all the way down. And so we do that by moving this pin probably just up one slot for this transom, but if your transom's angled further, you just keep moving that pin. So to get the Spirit battery on, we're going to move the motor to the side. I think that's probably the easiest. And we're going to grab the battery from this blue handle and the handle back here. And you can see on the battery that there are these two channels on each side that line up with these tracks there. So we're going to drop it right on. The first couple times you do that, it might be kind of hard to line them up. I remember that was the case with me, but after you put the battery on a couple times, you get the hang of it, and then it drops in just like that. The weight of this is very similar to the Travel S. The battery also weighs 19 pounds. This shaft is about 2 pounds lighter at 23.5. So together they're 42.5 pounds. Once we've got our battery installed, we need to connect our power cable. So we're going to open up these caps, and then we're going to line this up before we put it in. So you can see there's a little piece there that lines up with the spot on the battery. What you don't want to do is push and twist, because then you can break those small pins in there. So you line it up, push it in, and then screw your connector in, and then we're all powered up and ready to go. All right, so now I'll show you how to install the Remigo One. Different than the Torqeedo or the ePropulsion motors, because it's got this transom bracket and then the battery is built into the shaft itself. So first we're going to take this bracket, which weighs 5.5 pounds. I'm going to center it on our dinghy here, tighten up these bolts. So the Remigo is actually the lightest weight motor of any of these. The motor itself is 26.5 pounds, plus this 5.5 pound bracket comes in at just 31 pounds, or excuse me, 32 pounds. So we're going to tighten those up, and we're going to take off this pin. I do recommend getting an extra one of those because they're easy to lose. And then when you're carrying the Remigo, the tiller can be used as a handle, but what we'll do now is pull down, lift up, turn the motor around, and then I usually just grab the top of the motor and the handle, drop it right on, put our pin back in, and then the Remigo doesn't have a button to power it on. Just pop your key in right there, and that acts as both the kill switch and your on-off button. All right, so next up we've got the Temo 1000. Altogether it weighs 39 pounds. Got a 3-pound bracket, 13-pound battery, and 23-pound motor. We'll show you how all that goes on. So I think the easiest way to do this is to have everything separate, not have the battery and the motor when you go to put it on, because then you're handling less weight. So first thing we'll do is put on this transom bracket. One thing that does kind of bother me about this is if these are to the side like that, they hit each other, so you have to have them angled. But it is nice if you have a slim transom bracket, these aren't very far apart. So there is both an advantage and a disadvantage to that. All right, so we'll get that centered, tighten these up. All right, and then we're going to swing this around so it's facing us in the boat. We're going to grab our motor. And this is going to slip on like so. Then we're going to push that down to lock it. And then we're going to put this blue pin in through the side. And then our seat might be slightly in the way here. But what's kind of nice is you can do all of this from in the boat and then lift the motor up, swing it around, and drop it down into the water. And then once the motor is in the water, you can either drop the battery straight down, or you can tilt the motor up and put it at this angled position and slide the battery in like that. I think that's probably the easiest way. So we'll get our battery, make sure that this power connector is pointing up so it matches up with the motor, and then slide it right in. Once the battery's in, we can drop our motor down. When it comes to weight, the Remigo One is the clear winner with a total weight of just 32 pounds compared to 39 pounds for the Temo 1000, 42.5 pounds for the ePropulsion Spirit, and 44.5 pounds for the Torqeedo Travel. The only downside of the Remigo One is that you need to handle 26.5 pounds at once, whereas with these other motors, you can break apart the battery and the shaft. But the Remigo One is so light that its shaft weight, including the battery, is only a couple of pounds more than just the shaft of the other motors in this video. When it comes to installing and removing one of these electric outboards from your boat, we find that the Temo 1000 and the Remigo One are the clear winners with their removable transom brackets, which make this process faster and easier than with the Torqeedo Travel or the ePropulsion Spirit. We also love how the Temo 1000 and the Torqeedo Travel have cable-less connections between their batteries and their motors, which make it faster and easier to install the batteries and less likely to damage
the connection points between the two.
So we're out on the water testing each one of these electric outboards out on a 9.5-foot inflatable dinghy from Further Customs. A few things to keep in mind, one of which is that we're in very calm water right now. It's an overcast day, not a lot of breeze. So if you're out on the water in windy conditions or where there's a lot of tide, all of these runtime numbers will go down in terms of both speed and your actual range. So for the Torqeedo Travel S, at 100% power output, we've got a top speed of about 4.4 knots, and our runtime is about 54 minutes. So now we'll slow this down to about 3/4 throttle, which is likely the sweet spot for most of these motors. All right, so now we're on to about 3/4 throttle, about 75%, just above actually, about 800 watts. Our speed has dropped down to 3.9 knots, but our runtime has jumped up to 1 hour and 13 minutes. So now we'll bump this down to 50% power output. So at 50% power output, we're up to 1 hour and 36 minutes of runtime, maybe a little bit more, 1 hour 40 minutes, and our speed has dropped down to 3.5 knots. So you can see big jump in runtime, but not a huge drop in speed because these motors have such great torque. So now we're at about 25% power output, or 290 watts. Our runtime has jumped up to 3 hours, and our speed is still above 3 knots. We're at 3.3, 3.4, right in there. So if you're ever out with an electric outboard and you start to run low on battery, you can see you can drop your speed down, your runtime jumps way up. Now we're up to 3 hours and 15 minutes, and you should have plenty of range to get home. All right, so we've got the ePropulsion Spirit at 100% power output, or 1,000 watts. Looks like our speed's kind of hovering between 4.2, 4.3 knots. And then our runtime, provided by our display, is at 1 hour and 12 minutes. We're at 97% state of charge. ePropulsion says 1 hour 15 from 100%, so it seems like they're pretty accurate with their estimates. All right, so bringing our power down to about 75%, or we're at about 780 watts right now. You can see our runtime's jumped up to 1 hour and 34 minutes, and then our speed has only dropped to about 3.94 knots there. We continue dropping our speed. We'll see what we get at 50% throttle. So at 50% throttle, or about 500 watts, we've jumped all the way up to 2 hours and 24 minutes of runtime, and our speed has barely changed. Right now we're at 3.8, 3.9 knots. So very marginal difference in speed, huge jump in runtime. Yeah, still 2 hours and 24 minutes, 3.9, 3.8 knots. Very impressive. All right, and now we're down to 25% power output, about 240 watts. Our runtime has jumped up to 5 hours and 12 minutes, and our speed has only dropped to 3.3, maybe 3.4 knots. So really impressive low-end range from the Spirit 1.0 Plus. All right, so our speed test for the Remigo One is going to be a little different than the other motors because we don't get real runtime data. We can see our state of charge on the right-hand side of the head of the motor, but we can't see how much time we have remaining. So right now we're at 100% power output, we're at 4.2 knots here, so pretty similar to those other motors. We also can't get exactly to 75% or 25% because we adjust our speed in increments of 10 on this motor. So we're going to go down to 80% power output there. We can see that our speed has dropped down to 3.8 knots, 3.7 maybe, so not a huge difference. We'll come down to 50% here. And so now at 50% power output, we've dropped down to a speed of 2.8, maybe 2.9 knots. And finally, we'll bring it down to 30%. All right, so at 30%, we're down to a speed of 2.2 knots. All right, so we're doing the runtime test for our Temo 1000. Right now we're at 100% power output, or about 1100 watts. We've got a runtime, or excuse me, a speed of 4.4 knots, and then our runtime is at 46 minutes. Keep in mind, we are down to 91% state of charge, so our runtime at 100% charge should be a little bit higher, probably 50, 55 minutes, somewhere in there. So now we'll drop this down, get to about 75% power output. All right, so we're at about 75% power output, 770 watts more or less, and our speed hasn't changed too much. We're at about 3.94 knots there, so not too much of a drop off when we bring our power output down a bit. Now we're going to go down to 50%. All right, so at about 50% power output, or 540 watts, our speed has barely changed. We're down to 3.6 knots here, 3.7. All right, so we're at a 25% power output, just above it, 300 watts. And our speed here, again, hasn't changed much, 3.3, 3.4 knots. So the Temo seems like it was a little bit less at the high end than the other motors, but at the low end, it seems to be doing quite well.
Please keep in mind that this data comes from our tests, which were done in relatively calm conditions. Speed and runtime will vary based on wind, current, and other environmental factors. Also keep in mind that the data for the Remigo One runtime was estimated by dividing the battery capacity in watt hours by the power output in watts, because the Remigo One does not display real runtime data. When it comes to speed, we can see that all four motors perform pretty similarly at 100% and 75% power output. The Remigo One lags behind a bit on speed, especially at the low end. This might have to do with the fact that it is not a direct drive motor and could lose some efficiency there. When it comes to runtime, the ePropulsion Spirit is the winner, which isn't a surprise as it has the largest battery capacity of any motor. The Torqeedo Travel and Remigo One are up next, kind of the mid-size batteries, and then the Temo 1000 has the least amount of runtime, generally speaking, because it has the smallest battery.
So we hope you found this video helpful. Check out part 2, 3, and 4 of our series comparing these motors, where we get into kind of the nitty-gritty of some other features, the batteries, charge time, things like that. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. And if you're interested in any of these motors or downloading our PDF with all the data in one place, head over to our website, which is emoelectric.co.